Babara sat high in the trees, hidden among the thick canopy, his dark eyes fixed on the apes below as they greedily ripped fruit from the trees and stuffed their mouths without care. He remained still, studying them. But his real focus was not on the feast. It was on what lay beyond. He was waiting. For a while, nothing happened. The wind rustled through the fields, the apes continued their plunder, and the farmers hid in terror. But then, movement. A flicker of gold in the tall grass. Babara's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. There they are. Shumba and his warriors crept toward the unsuspecting apes, their movements calculated, disciplined, precise. Babara leaned forward, fascinated by the way the lions moved, how they kept low, their bodies tensed like a coiled spring, their presence controlled and utterly silent. It was impressive, deadly. He had seen warriors fight before, but this was an art. And then it began. With a single motion, the lions struck. They erupted from the grass with terrifying speed, claws flashing, fangs bared. The apes didn't stand a chance. The attack was swift and brutal. Screams of panic filled the air as the apes scrambled in all directions. But the lions were merciless. Bodies fell, blood splattering the ground, as Shumba led his people through the fray, his claws cutting down enemy after enemy with unshakable precision. Babara watched the carnage unfold with quiet amusement. Impressive, he thought again. But you do not see the trap, do you, Shumba? His smile widened as he raised his hand and gave the command. The earth trembled. From the dense foliage of the jungle, from behind hidden trenches in the fields, more apes surged forward. Dozens. No, hundreds. They poured into the battle from all sides, snarling, howling, their massive forms blotting out the sunset behind them. The lions, victorious only moments before, suddenly found themselves surrounded. Shumba barely had time to react before the tide shifted. What was once a swift slaughter had turned into a desperate fight for survival. You are watching the Tales of the Savannah. Subscribe and be part of the tribe. Now let's get back to the story. The apes pressed in, their long arms swinging like battering rams, their numbers overwhelming the lions in a way they had never encountered before. Shumba fought fiercely, cutting down enemy after enemy. But he knew. He had seen battles turn like this before. There were too many of them. If they stayed, they would be slaughtered. He roared. The sound cut through the chaos like thunder, catching the ears of every lion on the battlefield. A signal, a command. Retreat. Without hesitation, the lions obeyed, breaking away from the fight, their powerful legs propelling them across the field in a desperate sprint toward safety. The apes pursued, but they were not built for speed the way the lions were. Within moments, the battlefield was behind them. Shumba led his people into a clearing, their breaths heavy, their bodies slick with sweat and blood. The retreat had been necessary, but as he turned, his chest tightened with an unfamiliar weight, dread. His sharp eyes scanned the exhausted warriors around him. Something was wrong. "Where is Paka?" The words came out like a growl, low and filled with urgency. The other lions exchanged frantic glances, looking around, counting heads. The realization struck them all at once. Paka was nowhere to be seen. Shumba's heart pounded as his eyes snapped back toward the battlefield, where the jungle met the fields, where blood had soaked the earth. His son had not made it out. Back in the field, the battle was over, but for Paka, it had only just begun. He knelt in the dirt, his chest rising and falling as he fought for breath. Blood streaked his face, not all of it his own. His arms ached, his body bruised, but none of it mattered. Standing before him was Babara. The Ape King looked down at him with amusement, towering over him like a shadow stretching across the land. His fur was thick, dark, his muscles coiled with a strength that spoke of years of domination. He was everything the legends had whispered about, cunning, ruthless, dangerous. "A valuable catch," Babara murmured, his voice smooth but menacing. He crouched down, his deep-set eyes gleaming as he studied Paka, like a hunter admiring his prize. "Shumba's son," he mused, a wicked smile creeping onto his lips. "This is a surprise." Paka didn't speak. His jaw was clenched, his breathing steady, but inside his mind raced. He had been reckless. He had heard his father's call to retreat, but he had fought until he couldn't anymore, and now he was here, trapped. Babara reached out, gripping Paka's chin roughly, forcing him to look him in the eye. "You will tell me what your father wants," he said, his tone still disturbingly calm. "You will tell me why he is here." Paka wrenched his face away, glaring up at him. "I'll tell you nothing." Babara chuckled. "Oh, but you will." He stood, looking at the apes gathered around him. "We are going to have so much fun with you." The other apes laughed, their deep voices echoing through the field. Paka didn't flinch, he didn't look away. But deep inside he knew this was just the beginning, or perhaps the end. Jabali sat under the shade of the great tree, his eyes scanning the homestead. Chipo was kneeling nearby, her hands busy with her work, but her mind, as always, was elsewhere. "Father," she said suddenly, looking up, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Can somebody pay money for a secret?" Jabali raised an eyebrow at the odd question. "Yes," he said, "they can also kill to keep them hidden." Chipo blinked at him, her head tilting slightly, absorbing the weight of his words. "People don't like their secrets exposed," Jabali continued. "They might do bad things to keep them hidden." Chipo lowered her gaze, seeming to ponder his response. Then, just as suddenly as she had asked, she went back to her knitting, her fingers working as if she hadn't spoken at all. Jabali frowned. Strange. His mind drifted back to an old memory, to a time when Nia had a little book of secrets. He shook his head quickly, as if physically rejecting the thought. Not now. That was the past. He turned his eyes toward Akina, who had been eerily quiet all day. Usually she hummed to herself, moving gracefully as she worked, filling the homestead with life. But today, she was different, mechanical, absent. She drifted through the space like a ghost. Jabali did not ask what was wrong. He did not want to reveal his hand, not yet. He wanted her to relax, to feel safe, safe enough to make a mistake. His silent observation was interrupted by a familiar voice at the entrance of the homestead. "Is anyone home?" Jabali turned. It was Nkosana. "Yes, you are welcome, Nkosana," Jabali said, standing up to greet him, shaking his hand firmly. "I was just passing through," Nkosana said. "Naya wanted to see Chipo, and I'm heading to Zuberi's house, so I thought I should stop by to say hello." Jabali nodded. "Are you settling in well at your new home?" "Yes, thank you, Chief. The village has been kind to me and my daughter." Jabali smiled. "I'm glad to hear it. And how is your family? Akina and Chipo?" "Akina is well," Jabali said, his tone hesitant. "And Chipo is Chipo." The two men chuckled, sharing an unspoken understanding. "Well, maybe this will make you feel better," Nkosana said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "My Naya has a boyfriend." Jabali's eyes widened. "What?" "I had to chase him with a stick," Nkosana admitted, shaking his head. "The boy won't let it go. He's always coming to my house like a fly buzzing around." Jabali burst into laughter. "Well, Chipo will never give me that satisfaction. She's always knitting like an old lady. I don't think I'll ever get the privilege of chasing a boy down." "You should enjoy it," Jabali said with a grin. "Some of us will never experience that." The two men erupted into hysterical laughter, their deep voices echoing across the homestead. Chipo and Naya looked up from their conversation, watching them with matching expressions of confusion. "What's so funny?" Chipo called out, eyeing her father suspiciously. Jabali wiped a tear from his eye, shaking his head. "Nothing, my dear, nothing at all." But as the laughter faded, Jabali's mind slipped back into silence, back into watchfulness. His wife was hiding something, and he was going to find out what. The night wrapped around Akina like a warm, suffocating blanket. Makuru village was at peace, the silence of the night broken only by the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. As she lay in bed, Chipo nestled against her. Akina drifted into slumber. Then the dream came. The air felt heavy, and a voice, his voice, cut through the veil of sleep. "Akina!" She turned sharply, Lulenga stood before her, his presence as vivid as if he were real. Her heart clenched. "Not again," she hissed, frustration tightening her throat. "You're invading my dreams again, Lulenga. I told you not to do this." Lulenga exhaled, his eyes pleading. I just wanted to know if you're coming." "It's tomorrow, Akina. Kitapo is excited, nervous even. Please come." Akina folded her arms across her chest. "Lulenga, my husband and daughter, they know something. I don't know how much, but I can't risk being found out." Lulenga stepped closer. "You cannot miss this," he implored. "She's already heartbroken because I lied to her for so long. Don't abandon her now, Akina, not when she needs you the most." Akina's breath caught in her throat. For years, she had cried for her daughter. For years, she had come to the river, pleading with the waters to bring Kitapo back to her. And now, when the moment had finally come, when her daughter was willingly coming to her, was she truly about to let fear stand in the way? She looked into Lulenga's eyes, searching for deceit, for arrogance, for the reckless man who had once shattered her world. But she didn't find him there. She found sincerity. She found desperation. She found remorse. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come." Lulenga's expression softened with relief, but before he could speak, Akina raised a hand. "But we cannot meet at the river," she added firmly. "They know about this place." Lulenga nodded. "Then where?" She turned, scanning the dreamscape. It was strange. Everything was so clear, so real. "How is it possible that I can see this place so vividly?" she murmured. "It's your mind, Akina," Lulenga said. "Everything you remember is here. Every path, every hidden space, you can see it all." She walked forward. "Follow me." She led him through the dense foliage. Lulenga followed closely, watching her every move. She felt his eyes on her. "Pay attention, Lulenga," she said. "I don't have much time." "But we do have all night," he murmured, his voice low. Akina's breath hitched, but she didn't turn around. She kept walking. Finally, she stopped beneath a large ancient tree. The roots twisted into the earth like the fingers of a forgotten god. "Here," she said, placing her hand against the bark. "This is where we'll meet." Lulenga studied the spot, nodding in agreement. "I'm afraid," Akina admitted. "I've dreamed of this moment for so long, but I'm terrified." "She's just a girl," Lulenga said softly. Akina swallowed hard. "No, she isn't just a girl. She's something else." But she didn't say it. Instead, she turned to him. "I have to go now. I need to rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Lulenga hesitated. "Your body can rest," he said, "but I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About us." Akina's stomach twisted. "Lulenga, I am married. Or do you simply not care?" Lulenga's gaze darkened. "You were mine first." Akina clenched her fists. "You let me go." Lulenga exhaled. "And I've regretted it every day since." Silence. "Then, I've been with many women," he admitted suddenly. Akina scoffed. "Oh, how charming." "But it has never been the same," he continued, his voice pained. "Maybe it's the guilt of taking Kitapo from you. Maybe it's something deeper, but you have never left my mind, Akina. I wanted to make things right. I just didn't know how." "And now you do?" she asked bitterly. "Yes," his voice pleaded, "if you're willing to give me a chance." Akina turned away. "I have a family, Lulenga. I love my husband." The words sliced through him like a blade. "Do you really love him?" Lulenga asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Or do you just want to hurt me?" Akina spun around, fury flashing in her eyes. "This isn't about you. My family is my life, and now you've come back just to disrupt that." Lulenga closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "I might die soon." Akina froze. "What?" she whispered. "There's a war coming," he said, his voice grim. "The fish people. They are a force like we've never seen before. I am leading my people into battle, but I may not return." Akina's heart pounded in her chest. "I wanted to tell you," Lulenga continued, "because if I don't make it, Kitapo will only have you." Her breath shuddered. "You're just putting this on me now?" she said, her voice shaking. "This is too much, Lulenga. What do you expect me to do with this?" "No more secrets," he said simply. "I just wanted you to know the truth." Akina felt the tears well in her eyes. "I just got you back," she whispered. "And now you're telling me you might die?" Lulenga didn't respond. She stepped forward, searching his face, her emotions unraveling. And then, without thinking, without logic, without reason, she embraced him. Lulenga sucked in a breath, his arms wrapping around her instinctively. The years of separation, the pain, the regret, it all came crashing down in that single moment. "I can't lose you," she whispered, burying her face against his chest. "Not like this. Not when you've just come back into my life." "I know," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I know." They held on to each other, standing in the dreamscape, the weight of the world pressing down on them. The past had never truly left them, and now, with war on the horizon, the future had never felt more uncertain. Meanwhile, Jabali lay awake, his body still, but his mind restless. Then, he heard it. A noise. At first, he thought it was the wind shifting the thatched roof, but then he turned his head and saw her. Akina. She lay beside him, her body tense, her face contorted in distress. A tear slipped down her cheek, glistening in the faint light. And then, "I missed you, Lulenga." Jabali's breath caught in his throat. A name he had never heard her utter before. Lulenga. Jabali's chest tightened as he stared at her. She was still asleep, lost in whatever dream held her captive, whispering words meant for someone else. His wife, his Akina. Tears continued to fall from her closed eyes, her lips trembling with whatever dream haunted her subconscious. Jabali clenched his fists. He felt like a man drowning, gasping for air in the middle of a storm. She was dreaming of another man, a man she missed, a man who was not him. For years, he had been her rock, her protector. He had pulled her from the depths of despair, given her a home, a family. He had loved her completely, and yet, here she was, whispering another man's name in the darkness of their shared bed. He wanted to slap her awake, to shake her, to demand she tell him who Lulenga was. The name burned in his mind like a hot ember, branding him with doubt, with anger, with a pain so sharp it made his chest ache. But he could never hurt his Akina. No matter how much it hurt him now, no matter how deep the betrayal felt, he would wait. He would let her have her dream, let her whisper the name of a man he did not know, because soon enough he would have the truth. The village of the snake people was silent, save for the distant cries of birds cutting through the thick air. The council of elders convened in the great hall, their faces lined with the weight of history, responsibility, and the uncertain future ahead. Lunga was present, his return after a long absence unspoken but felt by all. He had been away, gathering what remained of his past life in the city, finally accepting this land as his home. Now he sat beside Amina, his presence a quiet reassurance. On her other side was Kwame, ever watchful, ever ready. Amina's voice rang clear, steady. "Council members, we have a grave matter before us." She paused, scanning the faces before her. "Zea has come to us with a request. He asks that we fight beside him in war, as his people once fought for us. He calls upon our honor, our alliance." Her gaze hardened. "As you know, I cannot make this decision alone. The fate of our people rests with us all. Speak your minds." A tense silence stretched across the chamber before an elder, old and wise, rose to his feet. His voice was measured but firm. "We must think carefully, Queen Amina. We are still wounded from our last war. We lost too many. Our numbers are thin, our warriors exhausted. Is it wise to send our people into another battle when we are not yet strong? Self-preservation is the law of the forest." His eyes swept the room. "If we fight every war, answer every call, then what is left for our own survival? Will there be snake people left for our children, for their children?" His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Murmurs rippled through the council, some nodding, others frowning. Then another elder stood, his presence commanding, his tone sharp. "Are we cowards?" he challenged. "The merfolk fought for us without hesitation, without question. We owe them the same. If we turn away from them now, what does that say about us?" He shook his head. "If we abandon them, we abandon our honor. And if we do that, we will be alone when the enemy comes. Mark my words." A rumble of agreement echoed through the chamber. A third elder stood, voice quiet but powerful. "The merfolk stood by us because of an agreement made long before our time. Asa herself forged this alliance. She knew that one day the sea would call upon the land." His eyes found Amina's. "And now it has. Do we dishonor her memory by refusing?" Amina felt something tighten in her chest. Asa. The name was more than history to her. It was a part of her very being. She had once carried Asa's spirit within her. The weight of the past pressed down on her, demanding an answer. Lunga, who had been silent, now spoke. His voice was calm, but edged with concern. "I see both sides," he admitted. "We cannot ignore our debts, nor can we throw our people into a war that may destroy us." His gaze found Amina's. "But Queen Amina, my question is this. Do we trust Zea?" Silence. It was a question no one had asked yet. Amina's mind reeled. Trust. Did she trust Zea? She knew his kind were cunning, that the merfolk had their own ways, their own secrets. But she also knew that when her people had faced death, Zea had come, without hesitation. "I do," she answered finally. "I trust that he fought for us when he didn't have to. And I trust that if we do not stand beside him now, we may find ourselves without an ally when we need one most." She exhaled. "But I will not command this decision. The choice belongs to us all." The tension was thick as the council members reached for the colored cards before them. Red for war, green for peace. Amina's pulse quickened as one by one hands were raised. She counted, and then she spoke. "The decision is made." A long pause. "We go to war." The chamber erupted, some voices raised in approval, others in quiet resignation. Amina's heart pounded, but she held her ground. Kwame leaned in, his voice low. "There is no turning back now." Amina nodded. There never was. The fate of the snake people was sealed the moment Zea set foot on their shores. Zea stood before the gathered snake people, his towering presence commanding attention. He bowed low, a show of deep respect as his eyes found Amina, seated on her throne. The air between them was charged with an energy that neither politics nor war could explain. Amina's voice was steady, her authority absolute. "Zea, you came to us seeking aid from your oldest allies, and I gave you my word that we would give you an answer today. The snake people have spoken." She let her gaze sweep over the council. Then, returning her eyes to Zea, she declared, "We will fight beside you as you once fought beside us." Without hesitation, without second thought. A flicker of something dark passed through Zeva's expression before his lips curled into a slow smile. "Thank you, Queen Amina," he said, his voice deep and velvety. "I know this decision did not come lightly, not after all you have endured. My people and I owe you a debt beyond words." He placed a hand over his chest in a solemn gesture, then his tone shifted, lower now, more deliberate. "And if I may, I would ask something more of you, Queen Amina." Amina lifted a brow, but she said nothing, waiting. Zea took a step closer, his voice like the rolling tide, unrelenting yet smooth. "Would you do me the honor of walking with me? Show me your rivers, your valleys, your gorges, and perhaps—" His lips barely moved, but the heat in his eyes burned through her. "Your forests filled with milk and honey." The room stiffened. Lunga's expression darkened as he straightened in his seat, his voice sharp as a blade. "Careful, Zea. Do not forget yourself before our queen." Zea did not so much as flinch. He did not even turn his head. His gaze remained locked onto Amina, unwavering, challenging. "I mean no disrespect," he said smoothly, his voice a caress against the tension in the air. I only wish to see what belongs to her, if she is willing to show it to me. Amina felt the heat rise up her neck. She did not blush easily, but this man, he was playing a game, and he knew exactly what he was doing. She was no naive girl, yet Zea had a way of unraveling something she had long kept buried. She held his gaze, unflinching. I will show you my land. Zeva's smirk deepened, satisfied. He bowed his head once more, this time slower, deeper, as though sealing an unspoken promise. Lunga exhaled sharply, but said nothing more. The council too remained silent, but the charged air in the room told Amina they had all felt the shift, the undercurrent of something deeper than diplomacy. As she rose from her throne, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was between her and the Sea King, it was dangerous. And yet, she walked forward, drawn to the current, knowing full well that she was stepping into something she might never return from. When Zea and Amina were far enough from the village, the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Amina broke the silence first, her voice sharp but laced with something softer, something she couldn't quite hide. What are you playing at, Zea? Do you want to embarrass me in front of my people? Zeva's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. Far from it, he said, his voice low and smooth. I just wanted an escort to see what you're working with. His eyes lingered on her, bold and unapologetic. Amina wanted to be angry, but a laugh escaped her instead, light, unexpected. Zea was too much, unpredictable, daring, and utterly disarming. Wow, shift your eyes, she said, shaking her head. This is it. This is what you wanted me to show you. You're looking at it. Zea turned his gaze to the land, taking in the lush greenery and the serene beauty of the snake people's territory. He inhaled deeply, the air fresh and invigorating. You're lucky to wake up to this every morning, he said, his voice softer now. But you know this isn't the view I was hoping for. Amina raised an eyebrow, a sly smile tugging at her lips. I've given you my troops. I've given you my support in your war, but you want more? Yes, Zea said without hesitation, his eyes locking onto hers. I do want more. That's greedy, Amina said, though her tone was more teasing than accusatory. And I am a gluttonous man, Zea replied, his voice dropping, his gaze intense. Amina's breath hitched. This man was unlike anyone she had ever met. Most people tiptoed around her, careful not to overstep, but Zea spoke his mind freely, boldly. It was refreshing, thrilling, and a little dangerous. You're going into a war, King of the Merfolk, Amina said, her tone turning serious. You might lose your life. A dead man is not my type. Zeva's smile didn't falter. Then if you know the risks of war, why not grant a dying man his last wish? Amina crossed her arms, her expression calm, though her heart raced. Are you planning to die in this war? Maybe, Zea said, stepping closer. The space between them shrank, and Amina could feel the heat of his presence. But if you promise me something exciting, I might just fight a little harder, if there's something to live for. Amina's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained guarded. Maybe there is something to live for. If you survive the war, we can talk further. But if you don't, I won't cry for you. Zea clutched his chest dramatically, though his eyes never left hers. Ouch, that hurt me. That really hurt my heart, Queen Amina. Amina rolled her eyes, but there was a spark of amusement in her eyes. Zea leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. But maybe before I leave, I could get that kiss I asked for last night. No, Amina said firmly, though her voice wavered just enough to betray her. Zea leaned in closer, his breath warm against her skin. The snakes on Amina's head hissed, their tongues flicking out in warning. Zea chuckled, clearly amused. Ooh, she bites, he said, stepping back with a grin. Amina shook her head, though the faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corners of her lips, betraying her attempt to stay composed. I'll see you after the war, Zea, she said, her voice steady, but laced with something unspoken. Zeva's eyes darkened, his gaze piercing as he took a step closer, the water lapping at his tail. "Snake Queen," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "You owe me a debt." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "And if you know anything about me, it's that I take my debts very seriously." Amina's breath caught, her pulse quickening as his tone shifted, becoming almost predatory. Zea leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper, each word deliberate and charged. "And this debt," he said, his eyes locking onto hers, "will be paid in full." As he disappeared beneath the surface, Amina stood at the water's edge, her heart racing. Zea was reckless, bold, and infuriatingly charming. The storm was coming, and she would face it head-on. But for now, she allowed herself one fleeting thought of what could be, if Zea survived the war, and if she dared to let herself want more. As Zea swam away, the playful glint in his eyes faded, replaced by a steely resolve. His face grew serious, the weight of his mission pressing down on him. The water around him seemed to grow colder, the currents pulling him deeper into the unknown. His next stop was not just a challenge, it was a confrontation he had been both dreading and preparing for. Mami Wata. And that, my dear tribe members, brings us to the end of yet another chapter in our Mermaids, Lions and Witches series. This episode saw Babara lay a cunning trap, one that Shumba walked right into, and now Paka is in their grasp. But what fate awaits him? Elsewhere, Jabali wrestles with Akina's growing distance. She drifts through the days, lost in thought, and cries in her sleep, whispering the name of a man Jabali does not know. But what will happen when Jabali discovers the truth? In her dreams, Akina shares an emotional exchange with Lulenga. When the dust of war settles, will she be the only parent Chipo has left? Meanwhile, Zea refuses to abandon his pursuit of the Snake Queen. She has considered his advances, but will he live long enough to bask in the temptations of her forest of milk and honey? And finally, Zea has to make a long overdue stop to see an old friend, Mami Wata. His hands are steady, but his heart is not. Could there be something deeper between them? We will uncover these answers and more in the next episode. Until then, stay wild, stay curious, and stay ready for what's to come. A heartfelt welcome to Gipi for joining the tribe. I truly appreciate you taking your place at the inner table. Your support means the world, and I'm grateful you've chosen to be part of this journey. Thank you for choosing to be part of the Savannah. Want to support the channel and become an even bigger part of our tribe? You can join for as little as the cost of a coffee each month. Your support helps me continue creating the content you love, but of course, just having you here is already more than enough. Thank you for being part of this journey. To those of you who have already joined the tribe, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are truly the heartbeat of this channel. And as always, thank you for watching our story, and we hope you enjoyed it. What lessons did you draw from this story? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and be part of the tribe. Thank you for watching The Tales of the Savannah. We will see you next time in the Savannah.